All right, let us work on the very first walkthrough, right? Walkthrough equals exercise in our courseware, and pretty much it's an exercise that I lead you and you follow along, okay? You need a couple of things. You need access to a browser, you need access to a terminal, and you need to have curl installed to complete this exercise. If you want to just sit back and watch, be my guest. It's entirely up to you. Um, okay, so I'm going to exit the slideshow. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add another tab because I want to show you where you can get curl. So curl.c, here it is. Curl.c is where you get curl. You go to the download and you can go ahead and download a wizard if you want to work with a wizard. If you're on a Unix type of machine, you can download any one of these and install curl. Okay, so that's how you're going to get curl. All right, so I'm going to open another tab and I'm just going to access Google, right? But I need a very specific URL, right? So don't go ahead and just type anything. Type exactly what I'm going to type: http://google.com. Okay. There's a reason why I'm asking you to use this specific URL, and you're going to see it in a second. Okay. So let's press enter. Oh, for the duration of this course, I'm using Chrome. Okay. I'm using Chrome, and I'm going to be using Chrome's developer tools at some point, and so those instructions will be specific to Chrome. So ideally, you want to work with Chrome as well, even though all other browsers have their own set of developer tools, but different way of setting up the same exact options that I will. Okay. All right. So let's press enter. Let's go to Google. Here it is. You may tell me, big whoop to do. We access Google. Yeah, totally. We did access Google. Okay. There's a lot more that meets the eye in this particular case, in what happened in this particular case. Okay. The only way you can tell what happened is if you get a terminal and you actually do the same exact request using a different tool like curl. Okay. So I'm going to open a new terminal, grab it. Yeah, you see? So I just typed it here, wrong side, and of course I'm getting termites. I don't need that. So let's go here. Let me grab my terminal. And let me bring it on the screen that I'm recording right here. Okay, so here's my terminal. I can maximize it. Here it is. All right, I can enlarge it a little bit. Oops, Control Shift Plus. Right. Okay, so I already have curl installed. Here it is. Right, curl. You can say help. You can say manual to see the man pages and so on. Right, so you have all kind of different choices. Help. This gives you a very short version of curl. And if you type help all, well, good luck. Right, there's pages and pages worth of options. You can do everything you can do from any other RESTful client like Postman, like Insomnia, you can do with curl, pretty much. Right. The reason why I prefer curl is because it's going to give me a lot more details, right, as compared to the other tools. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type curl, and I'm just going to type the same exact URL: http google.com. That's exactly the same URL I typed earlier on. Okay, and that's the very first thing I want to do. So if I press enter, the only thing I'm going to get is pretty much the response body. That's the only thing you get. You get the response body. Okay, and of course the response body clearly tells us that, hey, this 301 moved, this document has moved, and you also get to see this. Here's where it moved to: http www.google.com. Right? Something you don't see from your browser. Right? From your browser, you just get to see the page. Right? In this particular case, you get to see the actual redirect. And how do I know it's a redirect? Because I see that 301. I see all that extra information. But this is the response body. I will tell you right now that not many websites will give you that level of detail in the response body. Right? They're not going to give you that level of detail. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to tell you, okay, well, they're not going to give you a response body. They're just going to tell you 301, and they're going to give you the extra locations. So how can I find out the extra details? What about if I want to see the full response? right? If you want to see the full response, then you're going to have to add another argument to curl called -I. And if I do that, now I'm going to get to see the full response. What you see here is the full response, like we've seen earlier on. Here it is. You see the metadata separated by a line, and then you see the response body. Generally speaking, you never get a response body with a 301 HTTP status code. You may, but generally you don't. So you cannot depend just on this. You gotta have to be able to see this response data. And what you see here is the HTTP status code 301, which means move permanently. And then you have another header that goes hand in hand with this 301 that says, hey, this is where you need to access. And these are all nuances of the HTTP protocol, right? Everything I'm just explaining are defined in the HTTP protocol. You return 301, you got to provide where it was moved. And it must be in the location header, right? That's the semantics of the HTTP protocol. You have all kind of additional information like security policies, dates. All these are metadata, right? All these are metadata. And then you have the response body. Okay. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the HTTP protocol, there's tons of sites that can help you. I will tell you what I usually use. So I usually use, let's open a new tab. I use Mozilla's Developer Network, MDN. And I go under Mozilla Developer Network and I go to the HTTP section. There's plenty of sections in here, right? Here it is. I'm going to the HTTP. I can go and find information about the HTTP in general, like HTTP guide, tutorials, and so on. I can even find information about headers. I can even find information about the HTTP status codes. And if I, here it is. Here's all of them, all 55 of them. Here's 301, move permanently. If I select it, I will be told does match. 301 move permanently redirects status response code, indicates that the requested resource has been definitely moved to a URL given by the location header. So that's how I know all that stuff, right? The other thing I would like to mention is that this Mozilla Developer Network gives you an easier to digest version of the HTTP protocol, right? Better organized in my humble opinion as compared to the actual specification documents, which is a single source of truth, which are a little harder to understand, right? rfceditor.org, right? If you go here, you can track down all the different RFCs, right? And if you come in here and you type, I don't know, HTTP, tons and tons of documents about the HTTP protocol. Not everything relates to the HTTP protocol, right? Not everything here relates to the HTTP protocol, and I believe we get like how many? All. Let's get all the results. Now that you got all the results, you got like tons and tons of information. About a subset of these are related to the HTTP protocol. If my memory serves me well, they're the 72 version. Yep, here it is, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. From 7230 to 7235, they're all define the HTTP protocol. And if you select one of these, you can select which way you want to see it, text, HTML, PDF, I don't know, whatever. Right? If you select one of these, you start looking down. It's a little bit more formal document. It's not as easy to understand and read. I'll tell you that right now. Okay? But this is a single source of truth. You don't need this level of detail, but it's here. Right? MDN is all you need if you want to learn more about the HTTP protocol, or if you see something in the no-name platform that you do not understand. This is where you're going to get to. Right? At least that's what I usually do. Even to this day, even though I build tons of APIs, I use tons of APIs, I still do it every time I want to refresh my memory about something. Developers do it. I can tell you that. All right. Um, good. Good, 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 good. The other thing I would like to mention, let's go back to our terminal very quickly. This terminal. The other thing I would like to mention is that uh, these are the information that are provided in the response, right? Everything you see right here is provided in the response, but you can also see the request, right? What if you want to see the request and the response? Well, there's yet another version of this command with -v, right? -v. This is going to be a lot longer, right? So if you type the same exact command with -v, I want to show you that you get to see, starts here, you get to see like all kind of different debugging statements, like the connectivity, what's the IP resolves to for google.com, port 80, because that's a default HTTP port. If you don't see a port, it's always port 80. Here's the request. Here it is. Right. The request is everything that has an arrow pointing to the right. The response is everything that has an arrow pointing to the left, including the response body. The response body doesn't contain any arrows. Right. The arrows that you see here is part of the tag, right, of the response body. That's it. Now you get to see everything. Okay, so this is the request. This is the response. So now, if I'm to follow protocol and say, okay, well, the response says they moved permanently, I would like to now access this, right? Access this location. Again, the browser does it automatically for us. That's why as soon as we type http://google.com, we render the page right away. So the browser does it automatically. We don't have to do anything. But with tools like curl, you get to see this individual sequence of requests that must be executed in order to fetch additional pages, the actual page, right? So we do the same exact thing, curl, location, and we can say -v as well, right? This is going to be a lot more, so I'm going to clear my screen. Control L if you're on a Unix type of a terminal, clears your screen. CLS if you're on Windows, clear if you don't have the key binding, Control L, right? So if we type it again, this is going to dump tons of information. Look at all that stuff. Here's where we invoke that command. We connect it to Google, get HTTP host, and so on. And now we get the response. And the response contains HTML content. You see that? Doc type HTML. Here it is. This is the actual page that renders Google search, the search page. Okay, and it has tons of JavaScript as well, right? It has images, it has JavaScript, it has tons of information in here. Keep that in mind, right? For every single aspect, you will have to go ahead locate what needs to be downloaded and download it yourself, right? At least within curl to see what it does. On a browser, everything is done automatically. The last thing I would like to mention is keep in mind that you can manipulate this request any way you like, right? So look at this Google host, right? This Google host. I can change this. I can change this to say something else, right? And the only thing you need to say is I would like to pass. I'm going to clear my screen again. I'm going to use my up arrow to get the history of the command, and I can go, hey, I can do it right after. I can say, okay, well, I want you to change the header. That's how you modify headers or you introduce headers. And I would like to come in here and say, okay, well, the host header, I would like it to say, I don't know, myhost.com. So I can go ahead and do something like this, right? And if I execute now this command, watch, see, say myhost.com. So I can change things like this all the time. Thankfully, Google catches that and says, okay, well, we didn't find the code, right? So Google can track that down and it can tell me, hey, we didn't find any of that stuff. You ask for Google and the host is something different, right? Or you can provide any header you like, right? I can go here and I can say host name. Sometimes there's a header called host name. So if I do something like this, watch. Now I'm able to get everything because I left the host untouched, right? But I changed just the host name. So depending what the corresponding server is using, right? So in our particular case, this header must be left intact for Google. That's why Google said, hey, it doesn't exist, right? Keep that in mind. So a good chunk of the information you see in the request can be changed, right? Can be changed. Okay, cool. We're going to go back to the browser because right now I want to show you how you can see the exact same information we see here from your browser, right? And I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to turn on developer tools. The developer tools can be found under the settings. This is the vertical ellipsis at the top right. And under more tools, you have developer tools right here. And here's your developer tools. You can move these any way you like, right? If you go to the customize and control dev tools, you can set it to the side, you can set it to the bottom, which is my default. You can undock it if you want to. You can put it on the left any way you like. I like it the bottom side like you see it right here. Okay. And you're interested in the network tab. That's what you're interested in. And generally speaking, maybe you have all. I don't know what your default is, but what you want to do is you want to make sure you uh, select all so you're able to see everything. If you select just fetch XHR, right? XHTTP request, that's what that means. That pretty much indicates just API calls or calls that are made through JavaScript. Okay, so you want to enable all because now if you go ahead and you access again HTTP, actually before you do that, you want to disable the cache as well. Make sure you disable the cache. If you enable the cache, if this is not disabled, that means you're going to be reading your, you're going to be using your cache to read information, okay? Which is not what you want. So disable the cache because we try to replicate what we've done earlier on, right? We want to see the same exact thing we've done from curl. In this particular case, if you type again http google.com, hit enter, you're going to see tons of stuff being rendered, right? Tons of information being rendered. And I want you to scroll all the way to the top, and it's on the second call that we're getting that 301, right? It's right here. If you selected, you get to see all the different headers. These are the same headers that we see with curl. Here's the request information. Here's the response headers. Here's the request headers. Okay. And again, we use the browser, so it has more information that are provided. The browser introduces a good chunk of these extra headers. Curl doesn't. Curl maintains minimal headers. The preview, the response are set to empty because every time developer tools 301, they're not going to display anything. Okay. So I'm going to kill this. I'm going to click the X. I'm going to close it because now I'm interested in the second call. See this? This is the www.google.com request because of the redirect. And in this case, we see the 200, which means success. Right? So if I selected, now if I go to the response, I'm seeing all that HTML code with the embedded JavaScript and everything that was fetched from by that page. Pretty printed, right? This is pretty printed. It's not like minimized like we've seen it without any white space characters. That's what I mean minimized in curl. And if I go to the preview, we're going to get to see a preview of that search page. Right? So developer tools will give you pretty much the same type of information like you're building as if you were using curl-v, right? Plus. Now, if I was a developer checking for APIs, just my API calls, I'm just going to use that fetch XHR, and these are actually API calls, right? These are information that are calls, HTTP calls, are made within my JavaScript to other sites, right? And generally speaking, these are what APIs are. And you're able to identify your APIs this way. And that, my good people, is this exercise, right? A quick introduction to the HTTP protocol and the tools that we use to identify requests, individual information, and so on, right? That's it. Section end. Talk to you in the next one.